What's going on, everybody? Mortym here, and I picked up Divinity Original Sins 2 a couple weeks ago. And if you haven't heard about it, right off the cuff, it is a top-down, more classic RPG, and what I mean by that is you actually build characters, adjust attributes. It plays very much so like a game version of Dungeons and Dragons, if that helps you familiarize yourself with it. And while that might be unusual to some people, it's still a pretty standard thing. However, I wanted to cover it, and I figured the best place to start would be character creation, since that's obviously where you start the game. Now, rather than do a full overview, which truthfully would probably take me an hour or two just to put into video form, and I figured that would be way too much to chew for a lot of people. So I figured what I'd do is go ahead and break that down into sections, starting with character creation. I'll go into other things later. Again, something to keep in mind as we're doing this, though, is it is a top-down isometric view game, and you can control up to 4 players from there. It actually has multiplayer and stuff as well. But keep in mind that it's top-down when we're looking at character creation. So first things first, when you come to the character creation screen, you're met with the origin option on the top left here. Now, there are 6 origin characters in Divinity Original Sin. You have Beast, which is a dwarf, Fane, which is an undead human, Ifan bin Metz, or however you pronounce that guy's last name, who is a human, Losa, who is a female human, the Red Prince, who is a lizard, and Sabile, who is a female elf. All of these have their own little backstories, as you can read here. Sabile was a slave. That scar on her cheek is actually how she was controlled. The Red Prince is an exiled prince of the Empire of Lizards. Losa is basically a woman with voices inside of her head. Ifan is a mercenary, a lone wolf mercenary. Fane is the last of a race that has long since been forgotten. And Beast is a rebel dwarf he rebelled against their queen. Like I said, if you have any questions, you can read these. Now, depending on if you picked one of these guys, they would have unique ones. Some are race, and then they actually have their own unique power in and of itself. Like Beast gets Blinding Squall. Fane gets Time Warp. Ifan gets this Summon Wolf ability, and those are all unique to them specifically. Now, let's say you don't want to play one of these guys. Again, totally possible. The other options are the Undead, which you can play an Undead version of the 4 regular races if you'd like, which is Undead Lizard, Undead Human, Undead Elf, and Undead Dwarf. Now, technically, the undead are their own race, even if you pick one of these other races. So, regardless of which race you pick, their active racial ability winds up being Play Dead, which essentially fools enemies to thinking you're actually dead, and the default Dome of Protection. I say default Dome of Protection because if you play a custom origin character, they all get Dome of Protection regardless of which race you pick. And then coming down from here, you get to pick a build preset. Now, when you pick this, all of this is a suggestion, kind of the standard D&D classes that you used to have. You can pick to be a fighter, that kind of thing. And essentially, it gives you starting skills from certain pools, which I will go into later in just a few minutes. But essentially, I would recommend picking the one that's closest to what you want to do, because it'll give you a good start towards that. However, it's worth noting that you can do things that are well outside of this. Like, for instance, if I wanted to play a rogue, if you will, which gives me abilities from the Scoundrel tree, but I also wanted to pick up Necromancy and kind of mix those things together, there is no preset for that, but you can totally do it. There's nothing stopping you once you actually get into playing the game. So keep in mind the presets are just that, suggestions. They are not in any way binding, they just determine your starting skills. So from there it breaks down into appearance, which is pretty standard stuff. You can pick skin color, which of course changes depending on the race you have. And then face, of course that is also relevant to the class and race you pick. Hairstyles, undead and lizards do not get to pick facial features. Mostly because, they don't have any. Whereas humans and stuff, you can change like their beards and stuff out if you wanted to, which is pretty cool. But undead and lizards do not get that option. So from there, Oh, it is worth noting they also have a voice option. There's Scholar, you get Adventurer, Warrior, Trickster, and you can pick from one of those options to kind of help better suit what you plan on doing with the character, which I thought was a neat touch. And then, of course, you get the preset option. Now, this is where you can actually edit the preset you picked. Now, for consistency's sake, I'm going to show you a preset that actually has two different options. We will pick, let's say, Inquisitor. So we come over here to preset, and we can take a look at all of the attributes. Now, the top three attributes determine how you are in combat, and the last three help with other things. Now, strength, as you can see, helps you lift heavier things. 1 point equals 5% damage to things that scale with strength, and it also affects your carry weight as far as your inventory goes. Finesse affects finesse-based weapons and skills. Basically, your classic sneaky thief type stuff, those type of armors. In terms of armor, it usually gives you the more balanced armors. It is worth noting that spears are actually based off of finesse, so if you still want to make a heavy two-handed warrior, you can definitely do that with finesse. It's possible. And then intelligence is kind of your standard, like I want to play a magey character stuff. 1 point equals 5% damage for things that are based off of intelligence. And then lastly, we have constitution. 1 point equals plus 7% vitality. Memory, which will, so at a base you have 3 slots, and then you gain more slots for skills as you level up by default, even if you never put a single point in memory. What memory will do is actually give you more points. 1 point equals 1 slot, so essentially you'll be able to equip more abilities faster as you level up, rather than be stuck with the base amount for your level. And then lastly, there is wits, which affects your critical chance, your initiative, which is largely who goes first. It's the combat order because it has a turn-based combat system, which again I'll get into later. But initiative, whoever has the higher initiative gets to go first. And your ability to detect traps and find hidden treasures. So you get to pick one, unlike D&D where you get to roll this and you can have pretty high stats, all of them start at 10 and then you get 3 points to put in 1. And depending on what you're doing, it would change. So, if I was playing a rogue, I might do finesse and then constitution and then completely ignore intelligence and strength, for instance. But you can come in here and customize that. You get the first 3 points free, and then every time you level up, you get 2 points to allocate. And then coming down here to abilities, which is what I was talking about earlier. So this is actually where it gets a little crazy, and this is information you definitely want to know. You have combat abilities and you have civil abilities. Combat are the different schools of combat, obviously. So skills, weapons, and defense. So for skills, these are all of the skill schools you can use in the game. Warfare is all of your physical abilities. Now it's worth noting that in terms of learning skills, these only have to be up to, I believe it is level 3, and you could technically learn every skill relating to them. However, as you can see as I'm mousing over them, if you put them higher than that, it actually still gives you more bonuses, even if you don't necessarily need it higher than that to learn the skills. And what I mean by that, these max out at 10, and the civil abilities max out at 5. So even though I only need, say, 3 Necromancer to learn basically every Necromancer skill, if I keep putting points into it, it affects the passive ability. So for Necromancers, if I have points in this, every time I deal direct damage to Vitality, I heal for whatever percentage of it is. At level 10, it's 100% of the damage I deal directly to Vitality, I get back. And that's important because you have to break through armor and stuff before you start affecting people's Vitality. So that's how that works. Now, Warfare will affect all the physical damage you deal, including just your basic attacks from weapons. Huntsman gives you 5% damage when attacking from high ground. So if you're an archer, obviously you want to try to find high ground because that's where most of the Huntsman abilities are. Scoundrel increases your movement speed and boosts your critical modifier. This is most of your roguish abilities, your backstabs, your ambush, that kind of stuff comes from. Pyrokinetic increases all fire damage you deal by 5% per level. And it's worth noting that that is all fire damage. So if you have a weapon that also deals fire damage, for instance, if you have a wand that's damage type is fire, you will shoot fire out of that. And if you have a higher pyrokinetic, it will deal more damage as well, because it is all fire damage you deal, not just the fire spells. Hydrosophist increases all water damage you deal and any vitality or healing or magic armor restoration that you cause. So basically, Hydrosophist is the healing school, if you will, as well as dealing water damage. So it increases both of those things. Aerothurge is arrow damage, which is pretty awesome. It is also the one that affects most of the stunning that happens. Geomancer increases all poison and earth damage you deal and any physical armor restoration you do. So from there, I already explained what Necromancer does. Summoning increases vitality damage and the armor of your summons and totems. And Polymorph actually gives you 1 free attribute point per point invested. Polymorph skills are interesting. They actually are part of the Metamorph preset. And just to give you an idea of what some of those skills do, we're going to come over here and find that. So Metamorph, it essentially involves polymorphing either you or the enemy in some way, and most of these deal physical damage that are scaled off of strength, but essentially it lets you change the battlefield in unique ways. So because of that, when it comes to their actual skill, it just gives you more attribute points rather than affecting the combat in any way. And then things that are worth noting is, like I said, you can mix and match these well outside of what the presets give you. For instance, I have a character that is Scoundrel and Necromancer, and the reason I do that is because Scoundrel has a lot of abilities that bypass armor and go straight to vitality. And Necromancer heals me whenever I deal damage directly to vitality. So as you can already assume, yes, that actually goes together incredibly well. So Scoundrel lets me hit their vitality directly, and Necromancer is healing me for that damage. So you can kind of mix and match them that way, well outside of the presets. For instance, to give you another example, Geomancer, in addition to dealing poison and earth damage skills, it also has a lot of physical defense spells, as you might imagine, that aren't scaled off of intelligence. So all magic damage pretty much scales off of intelligence, which means the poison and earth damage Geomancer deals is no exception. However, the difference being that it has a lot of armor spells that don't scale off anything because they just affect your armor. So it might give me extra armor rating, give me extra armor per turn, just various stuff like that. And that goes really great for Knight classes. I believe Knight is affected by that. Fighter has some Geomancer skills, but you can mix and match those largely because it doesn't need to scale off of intelligence, and as a warrior I wouldn't want to have high intelligence anyway, so I can still dump all my points into strength and still use those Geomancer spells effectively because they don't have anything to scale off of. So that still works. Coming down a little bit, we have weapons. That is a lot more simple. Single-handed, if you're only using a one-handed weapon with a shield, you'll get more damage and accuracy off of it. Two-handed increases the damage and critical multiplier when using two-handed weapons. It is worth noting that the critical multiplier, basically that essentially means critical damage done, don't affect your combat at all. They affect how you interact with the world. So telekinesis allows me to move items telepathically. So whereas strength, as part of our attributes from earlier, affects what we can physically carry, telekinesis allows us to move things regardless of how much they weigh. And like I said, these cap out at 5, so every 5 points gives me basically more range for telekinesis. And then we have Lore Master. So by right-clicking an enemy during combat or just out in the world, if I right-click anything, I can examine it and it will give me information. The 1 through 5 Lore Master basically affects what I know about that when I examine it. And it also allows us to identify higher level items for free rather than having to go to an NPC to do it. So that is our craftsmanship. And then our nasty deeds is sneaking and thievery. So sneaking, basically 1 through 5, it will shrink the NPC sight cones as you're sneaking around and makes you sneak faster. Whereas thievery affects your ability to lockpick and your pickpocketing skills. So basically, when you pickpocket something, you'll get a maximum item weight you can pickpocket. pickpocket, and a total gold value. So the way this will work is, if you have the skill, the pickpocket is actually guaranteed. What isn't guaranteed is whether or not you get caught doing it. And what I mean by that is, if I have the skill, I can totally pickpocket them, but that won't stop them from, turning around while I'm trying to pickpocket them. As I said, this is a top-down, so that makes more sense for this particular style of game. And then from there we have personality, which is bartering, persuasion, and lucky charm. Now, bartering increases exactly that, our bartering skills, our ability to get items cheaper and sell them for more. There is persuasion, which helps in dialogue options, essentially, which helps out. And then lucky charm basically gives us extra treasure every time we loot something that has random treasure. So that is all of our combat and civil abilities. Now, this is a great place to mention this because you can also dig things up, and with thievery, in order to lockpick something, I actually have to have a lockpick. Now, interestingly enough, there are two origins, if you will, that affect this. If you pick a lizard, you don't need a shovel to dig things up. They can use their claws to dig it up themselves. And if you pick an undead, you don't need lockpicks. They will actually use their bony fingers to lockpick for you. So if you pick an undead lizard, you will never need a shovel, and you will never need a lockpick. So, good things to know. And then there are also some other character things that I will go to right now, mostly because they don't fit in with the rest of this. So, humans, they're okay. They get Encourage as an active ability, which affects their, it increases everyone's primary attributes, and then they get Dome of Protection as a default, like I said earlier. And then, because we're getting to the talents section, basically what I'm doing now is going over the individual talents that are preset. So talents, much like feats from D&D, are things you get to pick every 3 or 4 levels. Now, you start out with 2 based on your race that you picked, essentially. So humans get Ingenious, which gives them bonus initiative and extra crit chance, and Thrifty, and that'll give them bartering. Whereas elves get Corpse Eater and Ancestral Knowledge. Corpse Eater, elves in this game, memory is a cornerstone of their society. So when they eat the body parts of the dead, they will learn information about them, basically how they lived their life and things like that. And then they also get Ancestral Knowledge, which gives them an immediate +1 to Lore Master. Dwarves get Sturdy, which gives them extra Vitality and 5% dodge chance, and Dwarven Guile, which gives them +1 in sneaking. Now, if you pick one of the origin characters, they get those by default as well for their race, because that is determined by their race and nothing else. For instance, lizards get Sophisticated and Spellsong. Spellsong gives you +1 in Persuasion, whereas Sophisticated gives +10 fire and poison resistance. Now, coming back here to the undead, in addition to those things, the undead get a little bit extra. So they get the regular one for their class. So if I pick an undead elf, they still get Corpse Eater, but it drops the extra bonuses, if you will. They get the primary talent from their class, or their race, if you will. So dwarves still get Sturdy, elves still get Corpse Eater, humans still get Ingenious, and lizards still get Sophisticated. Like I said, they keep the primary talent for their race. And then the other one gets replaced with the undead talent, which completely flips how they heal. So rather than heal from healing potions or things like that, it grants them Poison Absorb, which basically they heal from poison instead. So if they walk into a poison well, they heal from it rather than being damaged. And if they're attacked with poison abilities, it heals them rather than hurts them. And vice versa, if they get hit with restoration spells, it hurts them. Very similar to old Final Fantasy stuff. Now, going from there to our actual talents, now that I've explained some of that, much like feats from D&D, every, I believe it is 3 levels, you get to pick a talent. All the ones you can't use are always thrown here at the bottom. Some have, 2 of them have level restrictions, and the other ones require certain skills. It is worth noting that some of these are incompatible with the other. So if you pick Metamorph, it defaults to... Oh wait, my bad. That one's just a level 2 thing. Yeah. So Executioner, it would require Warfare 1 to actually acquire, but if I get it, it is incompatible with the pawn. So if I pick up Executioner, I will never be able to pick up the pawn should I choose to. So it is worth noting that because there are so many, as you can see, I'm not going to go over each individual one right now. I'm actually going to make a separate video about the talents because they are very diverse and they affect a lot of things. So what I'm going to do from here, though, is explain that all of this stuff for the character you choose is not entirely binding. You have to get through Act 1 of the game first, but starting in Act 2, you gain access to a magic mirror that will actually let you change your appearance and your attributes and not your abilities, but your attributes and or not your skills rather, but your abilities and your attributes. You'll be able to redistribute them, and that means all of the ones that you've put into your character. So not just what you start with, mind you, all of the ones that you've used. So and that includes talents. So from there, we actually have tags. Now, if you pick an origin character, the tags are picked for you. And what these are essentially where you came from. You know, are you a barbarian, a jester, a mystic, noble, outlaw, all that stuff. These will determine dialogue options for you as you run out through the game. So if you're a scholar, if you've studied all your life, you'll have certain knowledge that other people wouldn't have. Just as if you're a soldier, if you've been a soldier your entire life, you would know things about the military that obviously a scholar would not. And that plays into dialogue options as you play throughout the game. Now, it is worth noting that these are not all of the tags. You get to choose 2 if you didn't choose an origin character. If you choose an origin character, they are usually set in stone. Truthfully, I haven't messed with it much, so I don't know if it lets you change them. Yeah, they're locked on an origin character. Just wanted to double check real fast. But yeah, they are definitely locked if you choose an origin character, which of course makes sense because they have a certain origin. They came from a certain place. So if you pick a custom character, however, you get to pick 2 of these. Now, like I said, these are not all of them. As you play through the game and you do certain deeds enough times, you can actually unlock more. One I've personally unlocked is Villain, which shouldn't be exactly a secret how you get that. Do terrible things and you will eventually be branded a villain. And that will unlock more dialogue option for you and things like that. And lastly, we have instruments. So basically, as you play through the game, whenever you pick up on a certain moment for your character, you can pick one of these instruments to play in the background, and you can kind of hear a highlight of it there. Not really important to anything, I just thought it was a nice touch. So that is going to wrap up character creation. I think the next thing I'm going to do from here is probably an introduction to how the combat works and some of the game's mechanics. And then after that, I'm probably going to do the talents, because the talent video will make a lot more sense once you've actually seen how combat works. It is a turn-based system. And I could go over this with you right now, but a lot of it, well, I'm sure would be self-explanatory. Some of it will be a lot easier to understand should you know how combat works. So, with that said, I certainly hope you enjoy what you saw. I'm actually falling in love with this game. I really enjoy it, and I'm excited to share videos about it. So, if you are looking forward to any of those things, by all means, subscribe. If you have anything to say, leave it down in the comment section below. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, but have a great day either way.